Uh, am, am I able to share my screen here?
Yes, you are.
Cool, cool, cool. Awesome. Hi, everybody. Let me get this started. Get it all configured. All right. Okay, so my part of the new standards is responding. Um, and I'll just go ahead and tell you a little bit about my thoughts on how we can implement this new standard in the classroom. I'm sure this has already been mentioned, but a lot of this stuff we already do, right? I mean, the standards may look different, but the strategies and the things that we do every day in class, they still work. And so we're just really adapting a new way of thinking about how we approach these strategies. And so I'm going to be talking a lot about like just making sure that we're thinking about I love the new standards because everything is active. And so just kind of keep that in mind as we go through the presentation. So responding in the choral classroom. Oh, little word of inspiration from our fellow Arcans and Bill Clinton. The price of doing the same old thing is far higher than the price of change. And I wanted to throw that in there because anytime we have something new, we all get a little stressed out. But I also make the point that I don't think there's any amount of change that could top last school year. So if you made it through last school year, implementing these new standards and getting everything ironed out with your curriculum is going to be so easy. Okay, so for today's discussion, we're just going to talk about responding and about it being an artistic process. And then we're going to talk about each anchor standard, what they are. I love the outline of the new standards. They're just so much more aesthetically pleasing. And we're going to talk about strategies for each anchor standard as well. And feel free to chime in. I'm always terrible about checking the chat, but if you want to just unmute and mention something, you can, especially during the strategies portion. Okay, so we have 3 anchor standards for responding. I made sure to really highlight some verbs in here and some specific words, just so that you have an idea. So our first anchor standard, RE7, is select. And that it just means their students will perceive and analyze artistic work. RE8 is interpret, and then we have critique. Interpret is students will interpret intent, meaning in artistic work, and RE9, critique, students will apply criteria to evaluate artistic work. So I tried to organize this in the best way that I could to make it simple for everybody. So this is a really just good visual outline of each anchor standard, and I will share this. I'll save this as a PNG and send it to Terry and Curtis. But we have the first anchor standard here, select. And each anchor standard has those essential questions. So the essential questions here are how do individuals choose music to experience? And how does understanding the structure and context of the music influence a response? So the way that I look at these standards is these are also questions that we ask ourselves going through literature selection. And as most of you know, like literature selection is the hardest part of what we do. If you do it right, choosing the right literature should be really taxing. It should not be simple. Because there's so much lit out there and every group is so unique. And then on top of that, from year to year, your top group may be different, maybe in ability, but also just in the overall quality of sound. And you may be looking for something different. And so doing the same old over and over again, it's not going to cut it. And we all know that as teachers. And I think it's really important to let the kids in on that process as well. I'm not shy at all to let them know that it's really hard to pick literature. And we've all had the students say, well, why can't we sing this? Or why aren't we singing? Why I want to sing this song, and that like have suggestions and things like that. And that's important for them to be engaging in that process of thinking about literature. but they sometimes don't have the knowledge or the skills to understand why we choose literature the way we do. And so this is really just letting them in on our process that we do all the time when planning what we're going to have them sing. And so I let my kids in on that process, and I'll talk a little bit about how I do that a little bit later. So under the essential questions, I've got the I can statements. I love these statements because they're really, really clear and easy to understand at each individual level. And for the strategies that I have kind of picked out, I just picked out a few that I've used. And I hope that if any of you have others that you'll mention them. But these strategies can all be modified for whatever level your students may be at, right? The part that I find most challenging about ironing out all of these anchor standards is, sometimes we have groups that are very, very mixed, where the entire group may not be all at, level 3 accomplished. You may have some students in there that are still kind of at a proficient level and some students that are really advanced. And, obviously it's not ideal, but there could even be like a y'all come type choir situation where you have kids who are at the novice level and you have kids that have been in choir and can really understand some advanced concepts in choir, but maybe they're not ready for like a top ensemble level of literature, or that doesn't work schedule, whatever. And you've got just a really a big wash of kids and ability in there. It can be really hard. And so also differentiating these strategies is really important, but you can do that in a fairly simple way. So we have the intermediate level. Notice that the intermediate level and the novice level, they all end with personal interest. Okay, so I can identify with guidance reasons for selecting music based on characteristics of the music and personal interest. I can identify with limited guidance reasons for selecting music based on characteristics of the music, personal interest, da, 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 da. And you can kind of get them really hooked into doing this with some of those younger kids. Get them hooked with things that they enjoy. Not everything has to be, not every discussion or every strategy has to revolve around classical music or, music, or just spirituals, or all contemporary cluster chord Eric Whitacre pieces. You can branch out and let the kids really learn how to gain their sea legs by doing this with music that they listen to all the time. Okay. That's kind of what I've done with my kids, and it's worked really, really well. I get them started with something that they really enjoy, and we debate music. And I incorporate music into the classroom that's not what you would consider like a traditional choral setting. And that really gets them hooked into it and invests in the process, and they're able to focus on the process rather than also a bunch of new content. So then when they get to that proficient, accomplished, and advanced level, you can start using some of those same techniques and some of those same strategies and activities that they're comfortable with now, and processes that they're comfortable with, but using it with music that you're going over in class that may not be music that they are familiar with. Okay, so here's some strategies for selecting. I don't know who all can see me, but I do have my camera on. I'm not sure who can see me, but I was going to talk about the first one, talking about selecting genres of music. I use something called Plickers. I'm sure several of you have used it before. Excuse me. If you go to plickers.com, it's a really cool formative assessment tool. And it's really fun for the kids as well, to create a brief activity, right? So I put on here, create a fun interactive lesson using plickers.com. You can play music from different genres and different styles, and have the students identify the genre of music. This is, of course, after you would have gone over it to some extent. It could also be used to identify elements of music. And Plickers cards, I have it here. I'm holding it up. I'm not sure who all can see me, but they are like giant QR codes. And the reason they're giant is because the kids can have them, and you use your phone or your iPad or whatever you have. It can be your own personal mobile device. It doesn't have to be linked to the school necessarily. And you use it to kind of scan the room very quickly. And depending on what side they have the card, A, B, C, or D, they're choosing an answer for a question that you have on the board. And then when you run your phone by it, it's like literally it takes probably 3 seconds and it loads all of the kids' answers. And so you can use that as a formative assessment tool. I have even before printed these out. I have the expensive laminated ones that don't have a glare because I use them in my music tech and music theory class. But I've also printed these out before and had them put them in the front of their binder so that they've always got it. It can be a really helpful tool and a fun way to make selecting music interesting or fun. You could also do a vote, like a yay or nay votes on music. Do you like this? Do you not like this? And use this as kind of like a foundational level activity. It's just a really, really, really good activity. And you can use it for a lot of the time, like you can set aside quite a bit of time for it, or you can just make it a really quick thing. Okay, let me move this. All right, so the other thing that I have on here is sovereignty cells, okay? I have done this many, many times, and it is a really good strategy. It really makes the kids feel like they're involved in the process. And it requires ownership of the music. And so just choose a couple of pieces of music. All of these would probably need to be pieces of music that work, that all of them would work well for the group. And let the group choose which piece they would prefer to sing. But it might be wise, especially if you're new to this, to do it for a performance or something that is not necessarily consequential. So you might not want to do this for the very first time for, say, State Festival or for CPA. But this would be a great one to do for spring concert. This one would be a great one to do even for the holiday concert. And have the students be able to justify in some capacity. It could be a think, pair, share. It could be presenting to the class. It could be open discussion. Have them justify in some capacity why the piece that they chose is a good piece for the group and why they think they would enjoy it the most as a group. And I have found too that for me, that helps me in my process of, like, number one, learning what the kids are into and what they're going to be invested in, what's going to be an easy sell for them. And sometimes, y'all, in the heat of the year, with the amount of music we learn, sometimes you're just looking for a piece that'll be an easy sell for them. Just as much as it will be a great piece to perform and it'll be a great teaching piece, you're also looking for something you're not going to have to sell super hard for them. And they will tell you they're almost never short on opinions. So giving them that sovereignty will really make them take ownership. And so, sorry, I was just checking the chat there. So that will really have them take ownership. So the sovereignty part, I love that. Start incorporating that in. Just, you can start small and just kind of go from there. I have picked music before that I was like, oh my gosh, they are going to love this piece. And I knew that they were going to sound great and it would be a great teaching piece. And no matter how hard we tried, it just wasn't clicking. And sometimes it just doesn't. And there's not really a justification for why it's not. And sometimes the kids just aren't into it. And if you give them some of that sovereignty, you don't have to do it every time, but you get to know what they're going to enjoy and what's really going to match their personalities. And it, like I said prior, it could be different from year to year. Don't get caught up with rotating the same sets every 3 years, because your kids are different from years to years. And thanks to TikTok and pop culture, they're different every 30 minutes. So keeping up with them is going to be more of a challenge now than it ever has been. So keeping our literature choices fresh is really important. And we can do that really easily by including our kids in that process. And then they also start to become, they create educated decisions of why music is chosen. Okay, so station QR codes. I love QR codes. I'm so glad that the rest of humanity has gotten with QR codes thanks to it only took us a pandemic for people to understand QR codes, but I'm so thankful because they are so helpful and so convenient. Excuse me. And so I set up QR codes around my room all the time. And sometimes I'm looking for feedback from the kids. Sometimes it could be, you could use this really for any of the anchor standards, but it works well for this one as well. So in this particular instance, it's just a scenario. You could use it for this. You could use it in a different way, but you could set up QR codes around your room. If you don't have a lot of space, you might be able to do it outside, maybe in the hallway or something like that. This isn't something that's necessarily going to be a super like chatty Cathy session. So you could set up some QR codes and it could be kind of individual or it could be group based, just depending on what your space is. For this one, I would recommend maybe doing like 8 QR codes, and they're just little listening excerpts, like 30 seconds a piece or less. No context, no title of the piece, no anything. And you have the kids go up to each QR code, scan it, listen to the excerpt. You can, again, have them do this in groups or individually. Have them listen to the excerpt, jot down some notes about that excerpt on a piece of paper. You could give that to them, or you could just have them write on a notebook paper, have them jot down some notes. So they're journaling, they're figuring out, like they're writing down characteristics, elements of music they're hearing. What is the tempo doing? What does the texture sound like? Is it voices are singing, or are the instruments playing? What does the density look like there? And then they go to each QR code, and then they've got 8, and they have to pair them together in 4 sets of pairs. And they have to justify why they paired them together or why they should be paired together if their style is similar. Doing little things like that it's so beneficial. That would be a really good activity for some of your beginner groups. You're really trying to teach them like how to discern different types and styles of music. And so that would be a really good one. And you could, again, that's another one you could scaffold and make it really simple. You could do it for just elements of music. You could also make it really complex for your advanced groups, and really have them diving into some research with it. And with that, I jump into style experts. So for the style experts, I don't know if you've ever heard like student experts or whatever, where they get up and they have a topic that they present and they're like the experts on this topic. So everybody divides up the wealth of knowledge and they are all responsible of making sure that their tidbit is learned. I have also done this in TED Talk form, which is really fun. The kids love TED Talks. And they kind of look at it too as like getting on their soapbox. So I've done little things like this before where they do some research and then they do a TED Talk over it, and it's really cool. It's fun. They use little bullet cards. But you can assign them like eras of music to research. And then each group would have to come up with, say, like a set list of 3 songs that fit within that era of music and present that set list to the class with justification of why they chose each song. Again, the whole concept of Anchor RE7, selecting, justifying why they're selecting. And I know we've all had that kid where we pick something and like you're going through like spring concert, we're going to do this song here, this song here, this song here, this song here. Well, why don't we do this song here? Da, da, da. And there's always this bigger picture. And I feel like far too often as choir directors, it's our life. We're always focused on it. And the kids don't see our process of why we choose something and why we can't do 3 barn burner songs back to back, right? Or we can't do 3 slow songs back to back, or we don't want to do like all of one composer here and go through that unless we're doing it thematically, with intent. And so letting them in on that process and having them do it for themselves, they're like, dang, this is hard. Like, this is, how do I pay? And I'm like, now you see how hard the job is. And they really do. They gain some respect for you and what you do with it. So I highly recommend it. Okay. Next Anchor standard is to interpret. And students will interpret intent and meaning in artistic work. This may be one of my favorite ones to talk about. The essential question here is, how do we discern the expressive intent of musicians and performers? Some of our I can statements, again, we got personal interest in the intermediate novice level, and it slowly gets more and more and more beyond just the realm of personal interest. And so we're looking at identifying and synthesizing knowledge and kind of trying to figure out how we're going to interpret music. And I won't read all those I can statements y'all can read. So I'm just going to share this with you. I'm looking at the chat really quick, checking in with the chat. Yes, stations are great for sectionals as well. Absolutely. Yeah. And like the listening center thing, like most kids have smartphones. It just kind of depends. just kind of depends on what your school policy is. I'm very fortunate. My school is they're pretty lax with phones. I know that it can be frustrating, but we lay it down. We lay it down really clear at the beginning, like phones are a privilege, and I really don't have a problem with them using them responsibly anymore. So when I'm talking about doing like QR codes and stuff like that, they're using phones. Now next year, the school, it only took our school a pandemic to go one-to-one with a device for every kid. But we convinced them to do iPads instead of Chromebooks. So they're going to be able to use that, thankfully. But the kids can use their smartphones if that's allowed at your school. You also don't necessarily have to do a QR. You could do a link. It won't be near as fun doing it that way, but you could do that. You could find other creative ways to set up those listening stations. Yeah, they're allowed to use their phones. Cool. Awesome. All right, let's close that. So let's look at some strategies for interpreting. These are some things that I've done. Move this over here. All right, so the music I like. All right, have students identify 3 different styles or genres of music that they like, and have them write a brief statement about the context in which, so I should have clarified in there, they need to pick 3 songs of a different style or a different genre. And this could be, with your advanced groups, you may have them pick, you may choose what genres or styles they have to pick a song from. With your novice groups, you may have them pick a song that they just have them go on their Spotify playlist or their Apple Music playlist or their YouTube playlist and pick out 3 songs that they really listen to that are all contrasting in some way, and have them really determine how those songs are different and how those songs are different in context of the way that the composer may have written them to be, and just talk about kind of the composer's thoughts as they were going through that song and how the composer maybe came up with that song. You could also scaffold this by not doing 3. You could just do 1 with your earlier groups. So quantity is a really easy way to differentiate instruction, really easy way. So keep that in mind as well. Then we have performance practice. This is one of my favorite ones to talk about with my kids, because performance practice is so important. How we interpret music is so important, even when we don't see it to be important. So when performing a piece of music, have an open discussion about standard performance practice for the piece. What is the difference between appreciation and appropriation? Determine how we perform pieces in a respectful way. So this is essential when we are learning music from different cultures, when we're learning music outside the scope of our comfortable Western European tradition. Discussing with our kids what it means to appreciate a different culture and a different style of music and how we do that. So you can say, I love spirituals. I love them so much. I love performing them. And that's great. But that does not mean that you are necessarily showing appreciation, because how we show appreciation, and I have this conversation with the kids and I let them discuss it as well, is that we seek to learn more than our basic fundamental knowledge. We also show appreciation by performing it respectfully. I saw a performance of someone singing Freedom Train, a group singing Freedom Train. And I kid you not, this entire choir went like this and did like the choo-choo motion singing Freedom Train. And I almost fell out of my chair. So that is why we need to have these conversations with our kids. And believe it or not, I don't really get involved. I will let them hash it out and talk it and debate and discuss. They're so intelligent and they care so much about being respectful and doing justice to the music and to the composers and the originators of the genre. And so they will hash it out. And But those tough conversations are important so that one, we aren't embarrassing our kids, and two, so that we're being respectful about the music that we are doing. And we're also acknowledging the root and the core of where this music comes from and how it should be interpreted through that sociocultural lens. If we aren't doing that if we're not having that conversation when we're singing a spiritual, their synapses will not be firing the way they need to in order for it to be performed appropriately. And so that is a really easy way to just let the kids have a discussion of what it means to truly appreciate it. Appreciation means doing the work. Appropriation is surface level. And appropriation also, when interpreting, puts all of the weight, it takes all of the weight away from the originators of something. So if you're not truly appreciating and doing the work to learn about it and let your kids have the conversation, sometimes tough conversations about how to perform a piece of music and interpret it respectfully, then and you're doing your own, like you're adding your own little things in that was never intended to be there by the composer, then that's appropriation. It's not your work. So every time we pick up a piece of music, we're picking up somebody else's work, and we've got to pay justice to it. That doesn't matter if it's Mozart or if it's Moses Hogan. We've got to pay homage respectfully, okay? So text painting. Pick a piece of music with quite a bit of text painting by the composer. You would ideally pick this piece of music and be using it with your groups. Obviously, composers use the technique of text painting all the time, so it's not always hard to find. But you just pick a piece that you could really highlight some text painting in, and have students synthesize their knowledge of the elements of music with the text and determine the composer's intent with that text painting. That could be really, 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 really helpful for them to understand how composers use those elements of music. Because a lot of times we teach elements of music like a checklist, but this is how we start applying it to what we're doing. And, they may not be composers, but they are going to need to know as performers, the composer's intent in applying that text to a specific element of music. And so just checking the chat real quick, make sure I don't have any questions. Okay. So just that would be a really good way. Just do a text painting exercise and have them identify it. Let them stumble. That's also personally, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, one of my biggest shortcomings is I struggle to let them fail. It's tough sometimes for me, but I'm learning and improving and getting there every single day, letting them fail, because sometimes they're going to try to justify something and you're going to be like, that was definitely not the composer's intent. But it's important to let them figure that out on their own. Let them at least go through the process, because again, it's not the product that's important here. It's the fact that they are using that critical thinking process of interpreting why a composer may have done something, even if it's flat out wrong. If they can justify it, at least give them that encouragement for being able to justify it. I'm checking my time. Good. Okay. So here's another one that I have done in the past. It's really cool. I've done it with my music technology class. So DJ for a day. Have students pretend they're preparing a playlist of music for a faculty reception. This would be like at school, and they have a good time with this because they think of their teachers, and they can imagine what a faculty reception, like either a retirement reception that a bunch of people are attending to support people who are retiring and stuff like that. But they can imagine what this would be like, and with the teachers that they see and love every day. So this is a lot of fun. And they must develop a list of 10 songs to play at the reception and explain why the set list flows well and is appropriate for the event. So I have done this a couple of different ways. With my lower level students, I'll do, like the 10 songs or maybe even 5 songs, but I have differentiated before for those kids that are always like done super quick. I let them have a little fun with it, and I let them also pick a list of 10 songs that they would not play for their teachers at a reception and why they would not play that for the teachers at the reception. And they have a blast, like cutting up, laughing, think it's so funny. But the way that this is really good for interpreting genre, and this could go really well with selecting as well. But the way that this could work really well is they're going to have to, and they're going to have to kind of interpret the different genres and the meanings behind songs and all of that, to make sure that they've got a playlist that's appropriate and not just all from early 2000s, not just all from 90s music or 80s music. They need to have a range. If they're going to have people there from anywhere age 22 to 65 or whatever, they need to have music that a little bit of everything that everybody's going to enjoy, and they need to sprinkle it out and plan it together. I've done that for my music tech class because they need to understand how to put set lists together and how to not do the same old like mumble rap songs 15 times in a row, and they really, it's actually kind of challenging for some of them because our kids listen to the same type of music over and over again. And at this point, if the song doesn't come on TikTok, they probably don't listen to it. So they have to really think about the different decades of music and how they're going to put that all together and piece it together in a tasteful way. That's a really fun one. Okay, so move on to critique. This one can be really fun too. And again, all of these things that I'm talking about them in depth. I'm wanting everybody to kind of get an idea of what I'm talking about. But as exhaustive as it may seem here towards after lunch, it doesn't have to be exhaustive. These are things that you could sprinkle out. It's so hard to plan our rehearsal time and do all these other things we need to do. But if you keep thinking about it as like, oh, there's this like little project I want to do with my kids. I have to do it all. It's going to take 2 days. It's going to be 2 days away from instruction. Don't think of it that way. Think of it as we're going to work on this the last 10 minutes of class, these 3 days, excuse me, and then the next 3 days, and then, or whatever. We're going to do this little Plickers exit ticket type thing the last 5 minutes of class or the first 5 minutes of class. When you come into the room, have it on the board, everybody make sure you have your Plickers card ready. As soon as the bell rings, we're starting the quiz. I mean, you can do it, and it takes planning, but you can do it and still get all of that rehearsal time in that you need. Plus, I'm always seeing, especially at the end of the year after spring concert, people are like, what do I do with my kids? Here you go. Okay, these are some things that you can do. Also, the beginning of the year. This is great. So like a day that you may be planning to go over, the syllabus and all these 50,000 dates you have for your program and all of that. Don't just talk at them the whole time. Have them singing. Incorporate singing into some of these activities, and have them doing some of these things that they're getting a little bit of everything. It's just going to help at the beginning of the year when everybody's really exhausted easily. They don't have that stamina built up yet. So the essential question here for critique, let me move this. Students will apply criteria to evaluate artistic work. Okay, they'll apply criteria. That does not mean that you have to give them criteria. And I'm going to talk about that in just a second. Essential question, how do we judge the quality of musical works and performances? Very generic, very simple to understand. Then, of course, we've got our I can statements. All right. So some strategies here. Okay. I love a good debate, and the kids love to debate too. They love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. And sometimes those debates are like really intense, and we have very serious topics that we discuss. And sometimes they're not, and they're silly and they're fun, but it's a way to keep them moving. If you couldn't tell from all of this, I don't like my kids to be sitting down. I don't like my kids to be honest. I have some little writing things that they do. But I like for them to be moving. So even if they're going to be writing, I like them to be moving. They're going to write or do whatever. I don't like them to just be sitting. It's just like, I believe that once you're sitting down, your energy is grounded. I want them moving. And but we have a 7-period day, and my class may be the only class they're not sitting at a desk. And so we're moving. So debate. We don't just talk out, they get up, we move like this side on this side of the room, this side on this side of the room. I put on here, choose 2 different performance settings of the same piece you are working on with your ensemble. After playing each recording for the group, have students choose which performance was better and why. So have them go say, okay, I played this performance and I played this recording. Okay, go over here, go over here. You may do it for your piece. Maybe for some of your younger groups, you want to find, you could do, I did this with my music technology group at the beginning of the year, one year, and we did it with Beyonce's XO with John Mayer's cover of Beyonce's XO. And you would have thought like those kids who chose sides were not just choosing sides, like they were fighting for their honor in that debate. Okay. So they loved it. They were like, this version's better, and it's because I like this version better because it's more like tender and loving and and I'm almost, oh, okay. Like I just sit there and watch them go, and they have a blast with it. So you can do it with just normal like music that they listen to all the time, with artists that they see all the time in the headlines, or you can do it with music that you're going over in class. That's one way you can differentiate it. And let them use the language they understand. If you're doing something more colloquial, let them use language that they like, let them use the slang, let them use whatever. But then when you start discussing music you're going over in class, start incorporating some of those musical terms that you're focusing on a lot. So peer feedback, I do this all the time. Love, love, love it. Sometimes I even have to, my really high performing students, I have to like have a conversation with them when we do peer feedback because they're like really serious about choir. So I'm like, hey, you can't crush people's dreams. Okay. So like, let's focus on one thing and let's think of a tactful way that we can help our peers improve. And it's really good for them. Our high performing kids need to learn how to tone it down and to socially like manage a situation that's not going to tear people down. And our lower performing kids need to be brought up to that level of let's use musical terminology and let's use a guide, a rubric to really determine how somebody can be better. And while they're critiquing their peer, they're also critiquing themselves. They're identifying ways in which they can improve as well. It's just a great catch-all. So I said, have students get into pairs or small groups and each student sing one at a time. With a pre-selected rubric, have them practice critiquing each other's performance. And that takes a lot. It takes a lot of like relationship building in the classroom to really get comfortable to that level. I maybe wouldn't do that with my lower groups, definitely not at the beginning of the year. And I would be particularly careful with all girls groups because they can get real, they can get their feelings hurt big time. And the boys, unfortunately, are fearless to a fault. So they don't care usually, but the girls will get their feelings hurt, especially at those like intermediate level groups. My advanced girls are that are like in my top group, my mixed group, they can handle it. But some of the intermediate, they're very, very fragile. So just be careful. I wouldn't just throw it at them. Okay. And you might even model for your kids how it should work before you do it. Okay. So record and reflect. This is another thing that I do all of the time. Record your group singing and have them reflect by picking a focus word for improvement. When I say record your group singing, I do not mean wait until CPA and use the recordings that Layton gives you. I mean, start recording your kids singing like first week of school. I will record them on my iPad, just super informal, or on my phone and share it to the screen, or just turn it around and let them hear it, or just audio only. And they're the first thing to do, oh my gosh, cringe, and I'm quirky, and okay, all that stuff. Now, oh, I hate it, or I hate the way I sound, or whatever. Get them used to listening to themselves. Have them record themselves individually, record your group singing, and have them discuss. You can do all sorts of activities, think, pair, share, really quick things. You could record them at the end of class one day, at the next day, play the recording as they're walking in, and then go, oh, wow, this sounds really good. Is that us? You know, whatever. Or, oh my gosh, we've got so much work on, and have them talk about it. One thing I like to use is polleverywhere.com. It's amazing. You can use it for free. You can also buy like a premium, but the free works just fine. And I said, for this particular one, record your group singing, play the recording, have them pick a focus word for improvement. Okay, have every kid pick a focus word. Once again, lots of front loading. If you have a bunch of immature kids, it might be tough to do this. However, on polleverywhere.com, you can block profanity and other things. So there's that. but just have them take it very seriously. And again, it's all about building those relationships to be able to do it. But then they submit this and they can do it on their phones. You can also do it on a computer, but the phone works better. All they do is they scan a QR code, they go in or they can text a number, I think is what they have them do. And they just type in their focus word. And as they're typing it in, make sure you all can still see this here. It creates a word cloud. So this is a word cloud that I used with my kids that they came up with. So this was a recording. I forget what it was for. So some of them put like dynamics, and it's tough because you can only focus on one word: energy, shape, consonants, emotion, confidence, whatever. So we talk about, okay, well, what do we mean by tone? How do we need to improve tone? And when we discuss that, the bigger the word, that means that word was submitted multiple times. The smaller the word means it wasn't submitted as many times. But that word wall is really cool, and it moves and changes and everything on the screen as they're submitting words. And it's really cool. If you don't trust them to do it without like putting bad words in there or being silly, you can do it and then just show them the word wall the next day, and do what you need to do. You got to white out words, you've got to white out words. You do what you got to do. But don't let them win. Don't let them scare you from doing it, because then they've won. So get out of your comfort zone, do stuff like this. This is a great visual. I would also use this as like the banner for my little PowerPoint that shows on the screen when they come in. Like that would be my banner. If that's the song we're going over today, I would have a little title at the top. This is our banner of improvement for this song. So let's focus on these focus words. This is also a great way to document that you are differentiating for your students who are learning English as a second language. You are focusing on focus words, you're using visuals. And this is very important for them. If you're not using visuals like this, it can be really tough. I mean, let's be honest, our native English speakers are hardly literate these days. So it helps everybody to be using these word walls and visuals and stuff so that they know, and and they know how they're spelled, and you're able to talk about them in almost an immediate context. So I highly recommend that you do the word wall. I love it. Polleverywhere.com. They've got some other things on there too, other than just the word cloud, but the word cloud's my favorite. Student rubric. Have students design various aspects of a rubric in groups to create a master rubric, which will be used to evaluate performance. So if you took, like, for instance, the all region, all state rubric, you could have students go through there in groups. You could either do like sopranos are going to do this, tenors are going to do this, basses, altos, whatever, and have them take a part of the rubric and have them write in criteria. That would be for your advanced group, have them write in criteria for poor, fair, good, whatever, all the way up to superior. And then use that rubric and judge them with it. Or have them do the peer feedback and judge each other. And so they are creating this entire process. They're a part of your literature selection process. They're a part of your interpretation process. They're a part of your critiquing process. They are a part of it. It is theirs. The ownership is there. And if the ownership is there, then your job is easy. Your job is so easy. And how are they going to tell you something stupid if they created it? You know what I'm saying? So, and it doesn't have to be perfect. Like I said, that's my thing, is I'm still working to like chill out and let them make a rubric that has mistakes on it. It's not going to be your grad school rubric necessarily, but that they're going through that process of being able to work through their mind of analyzing the different levels of proficiency that there could be when evaluating one another or themselves. So it could be very, very, very helpful. All right. And that is it for me. I'm going to check really quick before we end. I'm going to check the chat because I see we've got some messages. Can you give an example of a piece you use for text painting? Oh, Jason, it's off the top of my head, probably not. what's I can give you an example in context, though. I forget the piece, but this is done all the time in composers when they're talking about rain and they're doing like these falling thirds, falling, fall, something like that. So when you start talking with your kids about like elements of music regarding pitch and how that could be used to discuss like the text painting of falling rain, right? You could that's just an example, if that makes sense. I've used that before. One example of text painting is elegy in a city rail yard. Okay. So good. We're getting some awesome suggestions on here. Oh, yes, Jenny. We sang Jenny this past year. Tons of text painting in there. Beautiful piece. I used a lot of that as well. Debate, Sounds of Silence. Yes, Sounds of Silence. Simon and Garfunkel versus Disturbed. That would be a great one to do a debate on. Yes, principals love the debate too. They love the student independence. It's looking for analysis of style. Yep. Awesome. Yes, Eric Whitaker is a text painting god. So snow falling. Yep, we had that too. Awesome. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Tanner. We appreciate you presenting, taking your time, and enjoy choir camp this week.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
That's really fantastic. Thank you so much, Tanner. All right. So we have just a couple of more sessions today. We will take looks like about a 12-minute break here.